All right. Yeah. So why don't we just
let's just do it.
get into our episode?
Let's just do it. You worked the whole day. I'm already sleepy. Let's do this.
Welcome to Certain Point of View's Another Pass podcast. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. Just go to certainpov.com.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Another Pass podcast. I am Case Aiken, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Sam Alisea.
Hi!
And today we are doing a walk down memory lane again. We are continuing our retrospective on the original episodes of Another Pass that were part of Certain POV back in the day, back when it was its own singular podcast before it had spun off and then added shows and become a network, and then that show ended and other shows keep going because that's the circle of podcast life. So last time there was a lot. Like last time we actually ended up cutting out a bunch of stuff that was just like nerd news of the time that is like really, really dated at this point, since it's like being like, oh, there's new updates about the upcoming Rogue One movie, which, you know, obviously wasn't worth it. But this episode talking about Attack of the Clones, we just get into it.
Yeah. I feel like you guys are like primed. Like because the last episode, right, was the first time you'd kind of played this game on the podcast of Another Pass. And this time, you guys are just ready to throw down and debate on how to fix this disaster of a film. Because this is arguably the biggest disaster. Yes, Phantom Menace sets it up, right? So, like, there's a lot of things that you have to, like, but there's just so many things. There's so many corrections that they could have made that they didn't make. There's so many missed opportunities, and the love story is horrendous. That, like, honestly, this movie is probably, for me, the hardest one to try to rewatch.
Yeah, especially because given that this was at the time a Star Wars podcast, we allowed the domino effect to sort of play out. So we started talking about what would be then Revenge of the Sith, or like whatever the third movie in the trilogy would be, because it was officially a trilogy from the get-go. So we always knew there had to be a follow-up to it.
Right.
And so discussing Attack of the Clones sort of was like, all right, well, now we're saying Phantom Menace came out, but you get to do Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith however you want, or as much so as you could, which was kind of interesting. You know, with like Revenge of the Sith, it was like very much like, all right, there's only so much we can do because we are so tied down by the previous ones. And so all of our ideas kind of worked in the same kind of universe of like, all right, so how do we streamline all this to get to where we need to go? Whereas this is the movie where really like you have a lot of options.
Right, because it's the middle of the story. And I think middles of the story can be the most interesting part and can also be the most treacherous. As we've learned in a lot of movies we've watched, there's a lot of movies where we're like, oh, and in the middle, it just got really, I don't know what happened. Like, just, I fell asleep. I've said that so many times on this podcast. So I think that because there's so many possibilities, and I think going into this, you know, fair warning to all of you that are going to be listening, this is going to be a raucous, I'm going to use the word raucous debate about all the possibilities that could have happened, that did not happen. And I will say that individually, like listening to this episode, I was like, yeah, all of these would have made a better movie. And at the end of this episode, when we come back, I'm going to cherry pick from what you guys decided on. Because I think there are a lot of good things in here. I just don't think that you guys cohesively sold Another Pass movie.
No, this episode did a lot of what was more characteristic of early episodes of the show, and I like, but for the sake of sanity, we've kind of moved away from, which is like really deep breaking and reconfiguring of our ideas into additional kind of formats. Like there's a lot of like building on it. It's really much more like the game component of it, like the sort of fun of like, yeah, we're all coming up with ideas and spitballing off of each other, and that's all really good, and especially because it was a movie that we all knew really well. You know, we all knew the franchise really well.
Right.
We all knew the references outside of it. You know, there was a lot to talk about. That said, man, this is an episode of its time in some areas, such as this was Pokemon Summer.
The true summer of peace.
Yes. And like I said, I think there's an element that I kind of miss about that. And, you know, when we come back, I sort of am curious what your thoughts on all that were. But it certainly was more a full conversation as opposed to each person coming with like their idea and then just sort of presenting it.
Yeah.
Pretty much all of us, like, within 2 minutes. And I'm to blame. At the time, I was not, like, I wasn't the host of the show. I was the guest on these episodes. So I didn't feel the impetus to try to, like, you know, respect everyone's point of view, and I realized that I like jumped in with ideas because I got really excited.
Yeah,
and you can definitely tell that I'm not trying to be like the shepherd of the show at this point.
I mean, honestly, I think the excitement will pay off for everyone listening, though. I think you all made some really amazing, valid points, and the debate was lively. And so I think this is going to be an enjoyable episode, especially for anyone who feels love for the Star Wars franchise and a little bit of disappointment on how this movie could have been improved.
Yeah. On that note, Sam, did you end up rewatching this like you did for Revenge of the Sith?
I could not bring myself to do it.
No, that's fair. That's totally fair.
I was going to try. I was very much going to try. This was definitely a movie that was very difficult for me. You know, after I saw The Phantom Menace in the movie theaters, I was disappointed as someone who had read books because I felt like there were other directions that they could go. But I was still hopeful. I was still hopeful in where the movie could go. And it did introduce really cool characters. Like, I was sad that Darth Maul had passed. And, like, I was like, oh, that was kind of a waste of all that really cool choreography. But overall, like, I still had hope for the next installment. This movie was such a train wreck with a lot of different things. I don't know if it's just like trying to do too much, or mostly the love story killed it for me, and the tone of creepiness, and just, yeah, there was just a lot. There was a lot about this film, and I just could not bring myself to turn it on. Like, I think I'm still traumatized from my theater experience. I've seen this movie once and only once.
Oh, snap.
Yes. In the movie theater. And I was like, nope, never again. And I love Star Wars. Like, I've watched the last movie, clearly, and I've watched Phantom Menace, but not this one.
As I reference in this episode, I actually did try to do a cut of the movie down to... So we talk a lot about the machete order in this, which I'll go... Actually, this might help for people who are not familiar. So the machete order for the Star Wars movies was a thing that went around on the internet around like 2015-ish. And the whole basic idea is don't watch Phantom Menace, watch Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, then watch Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, then watch 2 and 3, and then watch Return of the Jedi. And that order makes it so that the prequel stuff with Hayden Christensen and Ewan McGregor and, all that becomes an extended flashback that happens between the reveal of Luke being the son of Darth Vader.
Right.
And the actual confrontation with Vader in Return of the Jedi. And I think it works pretty well. It's not perfect because 2 is rough and 3 is rushed.
Yeah.
And I tried to do like an edit down to like one movie, kind of like the Topher Grace cut that I've never seen, but I've heard about. And one of the things I really wanted to do was cut out all the villainous scenes of Dooku, because you can actually, there's only a couple when you actually look at it. And he does try to pretend to be a good guy. And then I wanted to recolor everything, but I'm not good enough at After Effects to do that quickly. So that was kind of a rough thing, but I allude to it. And that's what the machete order is. Like it is a better way to watch it. Like, because you get dramatic stakes, you have the nice introduction to the world, and 2 and 3 feel actually pretty good in that context. It actually gives some weight to Vader in Episode 6 that he did not have previously, which is kind of how I like prequels to be anyway. Like I want them to raise the stakes for the finished product. It's the thing I rant about every time someone puts out a movie that's like set in a timeline before the... before like anytime there's a prequel, like when Captain Marvel came out, the thing I disliked about it, because there's a lot to like in that movie, but the thing I disliked was that it didn't really raise the stakes for Endgame.
Yeah, it was just kind of an introduction, which is fine. It was a kind of a what the character needed in terms of an introduction and a Phase 1 movie, but it didn't fit into the phase that Marvel was already in. So
right, and contrast that with Captain America. Captain America does actually increase the stakes for the first Avengers movie.
Absolutely. Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah. So that's just like the thing that kind of makes these movies work a little bit better, and I reference it a lot. So if people want to know what the hell that is, that's what it is.
I mean, here's the thing. If I ever decide that I am brave enough to watch 2 again, I'll do it in that order, and maybe it'll make it palatable. Maybe.
It's not perfect, but it's better.
I can also skip things now, right? You can just take your mouse and click along. Be like, okay, I've had enough of this.
But yeah, like I think that we don't really need that much of a preamble for this one. This episode just gets into it.
Yeah.
You know, I think that Attack of the Clones is a much maligned Star Wars movie for a reason. I think people, if you're tuning into this episode, you're aware. Like you know that it is a movie that notoriously has some issues. And most of those issues are the same issues that all the prequels had, but it's pretty bad here, which is that it didn't feel like you got multiple takes and multiple drafts. And really, that screenplay could have used another pass. So why don't we get into that episode? We'll listen to that rockin' original Certain Point of View theme song. We'll listen to the episode. When we come back, we'll have a plug for one of the other shows on our network. And then we'll be back with the two of us giving our thoughts on the episode.
Woohoo!
Hey there, Screen Beans. Have you heard about Screen Snark?
Rachel, this is an ad break. They aren't Screen Beans until they listen to the show.
Fine. Potential Screen Beans. You like movies and TV shows, right?
I mean, who doesn't? Screen Snark is a casual conversation about the movies and television shows that are shaping us as we live our everyday lives.
That's right, Matt. We have a chat with at least one incredible guest every episode, hailing from all walks. We've interviewed chefs,
Writers, costumers, musicians,
yoga teachers, comedians, burlesque dancers,
folks in the film and TV industry,
and more.
We'd be delighted for you to join us every other Monday on the Certain POV Podcast Network.
Or wherever you get your podcasts, fresh and tasty off the presses.
What? That's not...
Can I call them Screen Beans now?
Fine.
Screen Beans!
So tune in and we'll see you at the movies or on a couch somewhere.
'Cause you're a whole Screen Beans now.
She will be mine. Aurora.
Welcome to Certain Point of View, your first step into a much nerdier world. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on iTunes. Just go to certainpov.com. And now, your hosts, Ben Milton and Addy Thomas.
Hey, Nerf Herders, I'm Addy Thomas.
And I'm Ben Milton.
And we got Case with us today.
Hey, Nerf Herders.
Welcome back, my friend.
Well, just to let you know, you can join the conversation. We're continuing our series from last week. You can join in on the conversation if you have ideas to add to ours. You can do that at certainpov.com. You can join the conversation on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Twitch if you want to. If you feel more comfortable emailing us, that's fine as well. All of that information is on our website, certainpov.com. So, Ben, what are we doing this week?
We are continuing in our 3-part series. This is episode number 2. Last week, we did a really cool series, one of my favorite series that or episodes that we've done so far in our 30-plus shows. We went back and we did a fix of episode 3 of Star Wars, of things that we would change to make that movie better. And we all came up with different ideas, pulled them together, threw ideas back and forth to kind of make a better episode 3. The rule being, the previous 2 movies have already been in place. Everybody is cast, so you can't change the previous 2 movies. You just have to go from there to try and salvage that episode. We're going to do the same thing today, but we're going to do it with episode 2. The rules are simple. Episode 1, as we know it today, has already come out. We got this is pod racing, and we got C-3PO, and we got a mess on our hands. Okay, we got Jar Jar.
Yeah. You mentioned 3PO before Jar Jar. That was weird.
We got a mess. I'm not happy about
Naked
3PO.
3PO is pretty bad.
It
really
really
is.
disturbing. It is the worst type of fan service.
Yeah.
So we have to deal with all that stuff, but move forward from there. Okay? Everybody understand?
Yep.
Okay, Case, you're on the clock, my friend. Well, how would you fix episode 2?
Okay, so I'm going to take a first swing at it saying, let's take the movie fairly close to what we have.
Okay.
And make it good.
Okay.
So this one was a little victory lap I had when I was having fun playing around with what scenes could be cut to make the movie more coherent. And here's the big one. Count Dooku is a good guy. And it works pretty well as it is. All you have to do is cut out a couple of scenes where Palpatine and Dooku talk to each other, get rid of those, change the color of his lightsaber to green. Because if Dooku is a good guy and actually found out about the Sith taking over the Republic, like he tries to tell Obi-Wan at one point, then all of a sudden he is a hero on the other side. Maybe humanize the Separatists a bit more instead of being like, let's throw in all the weird aliens we can come up with and have them all have droid armies. Like, change all that. Maybe have both sides have clones. Maybe they have what was it from Thrawn, the Spartui or Spartanex cloning, the super fast cloning, and then the Republic's got the slow clones that have to like age up, and they're all the Boba Fett's. But have Dooku leading an actual good side that have great points, like just differing points, so that this is a war between two sides that have legitimate conflict, as opposed to good guys and bad guys, yet the bad guys are actually not that bad because ultimately the good guys become the bad guys. Like, have it be a real honest to God war for real reasons, and have Dooku be that green Jedi, so that when you see confrontations later, because what happens in the next movie, then all of a sudden it's Anakin fighting a green Jedi in a battle in front of Palpatine, very similar to the one, and he wins this fight, but the next time he does that, he loses the fight.
Interesting. Yeah, I had sort of a similar feel about that too, about Dooku and making him a more complex character. I think that it would be really interesting to kind of flip the tables on that and actually have start the movie, with the crawl, and then we see, just like an Empire Strikes Back, kind of doing sort of the ring theory with this, and having all the probes going out to all the different planets, and then cut to Mace Windu standing on one of the Republic Star Destroyers, seeking out the Separatists led by Dooku. And that, so you kind of paint Windu as more of a menacing, warmongering type Jedi, so that there's some conflict within the Jedi Order itself about their role and what they should be doing to protect the Republic, for which they've sworn to. And then you play into some roles with Dooku again being sort of, he's left the Jedi Order, but that doesn't mean that he's necessarily a bad guy. He just has seen the corruption, he has seen some of the bad things that's happening within the whole system, and has, in his own misguided way, trying to correct those things. And maybe not even misguided. Perhaps Dooku is him in and of himself sort of the foundation for the rebellion that we later come to know and love.
Yeah.
I think that's a really cool idea.
I think it's interesting because for me, my Dooku is kind of similar. I think we all like this idea of
Goddamn it, we're supposed to have different points of view. I know. You need to have a certain point of view, and you need to have a certain point of view.
No, that's where you're wrong, because there's only a point of view. It is singular, sir.
Well, it's funny because our Dooku is not really that bad of a guy. Like, I keep on thinking he's sort of just coincidentally kind of a villain. Like, he's gonna be in that. I keep on thinking of that scene from Wreck-It Ralph, the council, where the scene where all the villains anonymous.
I'm Dooku. I'm bad guy.
Yeah, exactly. You're not just you're a bad guy, but you're not a bad guy.
Yeah, well, I mean, part of that's the failure of the writing of Dooku as a villain. They write scenes that honestly should have been for if he was Hector in the Trojan War, the hero on the wrong side, or the hero on the side that loses, and thus history tells us he was a villain.
Right.
That is sort of a glaring flaw that, as it is already written, you can almost make that case, and it really, you just cut out two scenes and you change the color of his lightsaber, which you can do in After Effects, and maybe some people have tried, and maybe some people found that it takes a lot of work to go through and frame by frame change the color of someone's lightsaber, but it can be done.
If somebody had that much time on their hands.
There's someone out there.
There's maybe somebody in here too.
Hey, no, I think we've got time. I think we were a little bit more busy here.
I don't know who you're talking to. I was at work for 15 hours today.
Exactly. All right, mister, I'm going to school for blackjack. Anyway, so I was a little bit more focused. All right, so what were the big issues for me in Attack of the Clones? The long lull with the romance was one of those issues, but I decided to move away from that and just kind of continue sort of my thought process with our last episode with Revenge of the Sith, was making Anakin's path to the dark side kind of make a little bit more sense. And I was also kind of thinking, all right, who are the clones? Do they have to necessarily be the clone troopers that we know in this form at this point? So I kind of like the idea of Anakin starting out this movie being ostracized from the rest of the Jedi. They know he's part of the Order, but nobody else likes him. Honestly, it's just Obi-Wan is his only real friend at this point. So it's a much more lonelier, angrier Anakin already, right from the outset. The other Padawans don't like him. The other Jedi don't trust him so it carries over from where from
Qui-Gon.
Yeah, exactly. And this whole we don't know what there's the prophecy, but then there's he's too old, all these other kids are people who've been raised in the Jedi Order, and he's already carrying over issues and attachment to begin with. Again, we see the reckless Anakin. I would like this arc to be Anakin in his recklessness actually saves the Jedi and becomes a hero as the Clone Wars begin. And I kind of see actually a fairly similar structure as far as it starts out with the assassination plot, because I think starting out as a little bit of a political thriller is actually an interesting idea, and then going into the beginning of the Clone Wars, I think that was a cool idea that Lucas had. So instead, if you have these attacks, instead of just being Zam Wessel hired by Jango Fett, it would be interesting if there were various attacks all over the galaxy. So the galaxy's being destabilized, and there's less trust for the Republic. You can even open with the attack on Padme if you want, but these attacks are being carried out by clones of Jedi who've gone missing or bounty hunters, and so these clones aren't actually the clone troopers, but other people. Maybe we see a clone of Darth Maul, so we have him for more than just one scene in the Phantom Menace. You could have a clone of Qui-Gon. You could explain that other missing Jedi. If you don't want to go with Qui-Gon and Darth Maul for whatever reason, but you could kind of they already did have the story of Sifo Dyas kind of going off and starting off this clone army being sort of go ahead.
Oh my god, this works so well if you wanted to do with connect it to the heir to the Empire stuff, and if you had Joruus Cybaoth and Jaruus Cybaoth, you could start introducing clones of Jedis. That would be a lot of fun there, actually.
And what I like about bringing in clones of Jedi is now you start seeing the rest of the galaxy lose faith in the Jedi Order. So it comes to this big vote that's about, can we just rely on the Jedi now to protect the Republic, or do we need to raise a grand army of the Republic at this point? So it becomes about centralizing the power of the Republic and actually putting a physical army out into the field. And so it can be people from different systems, then you have a separatist movement who isn't comfortable with that. So now you start seeing the Republic crumble into different pieces at this point. What were you going to say?
Well, I mean, those are all interesting ideas. I don't know that it works logically.
Okay.
It's an idea. Let's go with it. Let's see if we can make it work. Because I think that the problem with that, it gets really confusing for the viewer of the movie to tell who's a clone, who's not a clone. This is a clone
Jedi. It could be fun. I mean, this wouldn't work for this movie, but I remember before the prequels came out, there was a fan theory that Obi-Wan Kenobi was one of the clone troopers, and that he was Obi-Wan Kenobi. That there were a lot of clone Jedis, and that possibly Luke was being trained by one of them.
An Obi-2.
Yeah, Kenobi, exactly.
Obi-3 Kenobi.
That was the the Clone War was that something that may have been done to sort of preserve Jedi who had fallen in battle. All of a sudden became way overblown, and they were doing it too much as they were going into this serious warfare. I mean, I think there. I kind of like your idea of showing sort of the darkness, but the idea I was thinking about the other day that's unrelated to what I was saying before would be, what if instead of it being the dark middle, it already is kind of designed to be sort of the dark middle, even though really Revenge should be sort of a parallel Empire. What if it was the inverse and it was the brightest story in the group. Now this would be hard with Phantom Menace because Phantom Menace is already kind of on the bright side, but do a story where it's like Obi-Wan and Anakin at their prime,
right?
Like first off, like solving a mystery and then going off and saving the day, and having Anakin being reckless, like you're saying, like really like fixing things in a way that shouldn't. And in fact, it actually advances Sidious's motives, but it looks like it's such a huge victory for everything. Like massive.
So let me actually finish up here. So we'll have, this sort of like this, it comes to this vote, but before it kind of gets to that, you have the entire Jedi Council captured, and we'll even throw in Geonosis here for the heck of it and have the arena, you have the Jedi put in the arena so that they're taken out of the picture, and you have Anakin and Obi-Wan come to save the day. You can have them with the Grand Army of the Republic. They don't have to be clones this time, but they've been rallied. The vote is passed, and so you have Anakin and Obi-Wan as the big heroes, and these are guys who were previously, out like the borderline outcasts in the Jedi Order, and now they've become major heroes. So it's a huge moment of victory, but again, it's sort of that unintentionally dark victory because Sidious is kind of maneuvering through here. But then you have, of course, the split of the Republic into the Separatists and the Republic in the beginning of the Clone Wars, similar to what the movie kind of has, but this time you're not just dealing with droids anymore. You're like I would like the idea of Count
there's
Dooku.
life casualties on both sides.
Exactly. So it's actually it is straight up it is a separatist alliance, and you can have the Mandalorians as part of that alliance because they are a very fiercely independent culture.
God damn it!
Exactly.
I mean,
thank God for the Clone Wars.
One of the things that I was looking at when I was looking at this was things that we did not need in this movie, and one of the things that I felt was not needed was the Fets.
Yeah, the Fets in the way that they were. Yeah,
I don't need the Fets to be the parents of the clones, and I don't need Boba to be
the mystery behind Boba was always
really nice. Yeah, so I would have cut that out completely and just like the clones are clones.
Yeah,
let's say that they really wanted to have a Boba Fett analog in this movie. Like they desperately wanted it for whatever reason. Let's say
Mandalorians.
Yeah, exactly. Go with Mandalorians and have Jango Fett be one of them. Like, what if they were like the mercenaries, like they're mercenaries that are in it, and it's a band of them, and they're doing like the dirty work supposedly in this big grand adventure that maybe ends up with most of the Jedis getting kidnapped and like sparking the war, is one where Anakin and Obi-Wan like go in and save the day, and that could be really cool. And then you can end with the same scenario where like a young Boba Fett sees Jango killed and all that, and Ben, you're up.
How about this? How about Palpatine hires the Mandalorians to make attacks on both the Separatists and the Republic, much in the same way you were talking about using the clones.
Right.
But he uses the Mandalorians to go out and do these political hits and create unrest on both sides.
Yeah.
While playing both sides into thinking that the other one is responsible for the attacks on their people.
Yeah.
So the Mandalorians are in the middle being pawned by Palpatine.
Right.
And it creates the conflict for him.
I like that.
You know what could be really cool? To tie in a character to make him actually really badass. What if the way that they're playing the Mandalorians is that Palpatine has like deep control of whoever the leader of the Mandalorians is?
Mandalorian?
Yeah.
What's his name?
Mandalore.
Mandalore. Well, sometimes it's Mandalore.
Mandalore. Yeah. We'll just say Mandalore. So whoever's Mandalore, like Palpatine has like deep control over.
Right.
And like if you actually tried to have like a real conversation with him, you'd be like, this guy's like a zombie. And all the Mandalorians are like following him because they respect him, and he never takes off his mask, and like they're all like, well, he says this is what we have to do, and we do love to fight. Let's go fucking kill them. Okay, cool. And then finally, like maybe it's a young Boba Fett who kills him and realizes that it's a pawn, and then in the act of killing him, like unfortunately, like everyone else dies or something like that. Like it's some scenario that brings about.
Well, yeah, because that's the one Mandalore is the one unifying thing to all the different tribes and groups of Mandalorians. So once he's gone, like that group would
all the
splinter
clans
apart, and the clans would dissipate and go into chaos.
Right.
Unintentionally, he's basically ruining the Mandalorian culture.
Yeah, or even if they're not, or to make it more like this is like Boba Fett's the last Mandalorian. Like if you really want to hit that
killing
home,
them,
yeah. Like what if he sends them on like essentially a suicide mission, and Boba's so young that he doesn't go on the mission with him, but he realizes it's a suicide mission, and he kills Mandalore and tries to warn them, being like, "Dad, it's a trap," and it's a trap. I'm sorry, I couldn't stop.
We both looked at you.
Really? So we get a young Boba Fett in like, Dad, it's a trap. And Jango looks at him and goes like, "Stay back, son. You're no good to me, Dad." And then
and tries to disintegrate him.
Well,
we're just throwing everything out. See, this is the kind of fan service we don't need.
Yeah, no, all right. Yeah, okay, that's all way too much, and I'm not seriously saying it, but like a scenario where like he realizes that Mandalore is leading him into doom, kills Mandalore. It's a huge deal that he kills Mandalore. Everyone's like shocked at this detail, and then he tries to stop everyone else from dying, but it's already too late. Like something horrible, like whatever like suicide mission that they were on is already like underway. Like a big clone trooper thing is about to hit them, or something. Like and all like you see the last of the Mandalorians like stand up and fight, and Boba Fett watches it from a screen and like is forced to observe this entire thing, and then that's the last we see of him for the trilogy. Like same effect that Lucas wanted, that clearly producers are going to push. Like everyone fucking loves Boba Fett. Let's make sure Boba Fett, goddamn, it's in this movie, and we can have a tie-in video game with Jango. Like, but have it be a logical thing to really set up like this emotional connection that they wanted to set up. Like, why is Boba Fett out there and he doesn't like Jedi, and like what this and that. But make it actually have some pathos and have some consequences, because already we're down to the last Mandalorian, and then all of a sudden he's getting a clone son. So we get like so we get a mulligan on like Mandalorians out in the universe. Like that's it. Like Boba Fett's like a mulligan in that scenario.
Yeah,
that we have actually been given, and that sucks. It would be so much more.
Wait, did
interesting.
They say that he was the last one?
I thought it was heavily implied.
It, but they kind of retconned that with Clone Wars.
Okay, well,
by letting Mandalore actually exist and bringing the Mandalore.
Yeah, I was going to say. Yeah, that's
okay. Like I'm not as up on the animated series stuff, but like.
But they heavily implied that.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it had been implied for a long time that Boba Fett was the last, and it was sort of implied that like the reason Jango had a clone was so that he could have a son that was a full
Mandalorian.
Yeah,
a full clone of him. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, those are good ideas. The other thing that I would get rid of is the Gungans. And Jar Jar,
which is a full-on nuclear holocaust to Naboo.
Yes, like Naboo. We never go back to Naboo. Test? We don't talk about Naboo. Nothing happens at Naboo. Naboo ceases to exist. Naboo, just
what if they're like by royal treaty we have renamed Naboo Alderaan.
So now we all cheer when Tarkin orders it.
Well, that was a good point. Like Belated Media has done a series about this, about how to redo these movies, and that was one of his suggestions as well, which was to make Naboo Alderaan so that we have some sort of connection to Alderaan when it does get blown up.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And that makes all the sense in the world to me.
Yeah,
why would you leave?
Why
Alderaan
would we never visit? Yeah,
right.
visit Alderaan.
So you could have easily called Naboo Alderaan. We never would have known the difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
The only reason we would have never known, is
it would have been
Palpatine was from Naboo.
Yeah, well, and also it'd be tough hiding Leia in Alderaan.
No, not necessarily. Depending on how you handled it. Belated Media's idea, and I'm ripping this off completely from him.
I'm a little frustrated that you were able to reference someone this much, because I thought we were having fun and not an original idea, but I didn't realize that someone else did a series like this.
He did, and it was good. I've seen it. I saw it a long time ago.
Yeah,
I just watched recently to kind of refresh myself, so I didn't steal directly from him. But since we're bringing it up, his idea, and I thought it was kind of a cool idea, was that who ends up raising Leia? What's his name?
Bail Organa.
Jimmy Smits.
I usually say Jimmy Smits, but I thought doing it correctly
is Padme's like stepbrother or something like that.
Okay,
so there is a relationship there already, not just.
Hey,
friends.
random senator.
Random dude from the same.
Wait. So that Leia gets taken to her actual uncle, and then Luke gets taken to his actual uncle on the fraternal side. So we're just gonna.
It all makes sense, guys.
So everyone, all right, we understand that you people are related to now like the second ranking despot in all the galaxy. You're gonna take care of his kids, and in fact, the wife's gonna live with you. How do you feel about that one, guys?
It's not a great plan.
Pretty bad plan. Pretty bad plan.
Wait.
Well, so we've kind of addressed mostly like the big plot. What do we do with Padme and Anakin? Because it is a key part, and
you could open the movie with them already together.
Yeah. Do you have any tension in their relationship?
Well, because
what kind of tension?
Here's the thing about Attack of the Clones. When I first saw it, I was like, oh, there's a lot in this movie that I like more than what Phantom Menace had. Like, Phantom Menace had these trappings that were very similar to the original Star Wars, and it had a great lightsaber fight that we hadn't seen a fight like that before, and that was really cool. And they had like these very broad strokes, kind of like, oh, Obi-Wan picks up the green lightsaber to show that he has matured into an adult, and like it's very like basic, like here's hero tradition 101 kind of stuff going on.
Yeah.
And on top of that, it actually was very ambitious in the like political manipulation stuff in the background kind of thing. If that had been the pilot for a TV show, that would have been a really cool like first episode for a season that should have played out of like manipulations of Palpatine. But it was a bad movie. Like it was a very bad movie, and it didn't tie in at all really to what we associate with Star Wars. Like I've said, it feels like a different franchise, and it really doesn't have a lot of like relation in terms of the characters. We barely care about most of them. There's a reason the machete order exists. You can just cut out Phantom Menace, and the other two work fine as like kind of a flashback for Anakin. So if this movie having that big time jump, and obviously you're going to do a big time jump because we need to get rid of Jake Lloyd, because that was how it was in the first one. So let's move on and get to like a middle-aged Obi-Wan Kenobi, or at least older still young man Obi-Wan Kenobi, and give like a very young man, teenager kind of Anakin. They could already be in a thing. Like there's that time jump. The fact that like that time
she's
jump,
older.
If that time jump took 2 months longer, they already would be in a thing. Mm-hmm. Like if the movie starts and they're dating pretty fast, or not dating, but like they basically are. They're in this like weird courtship. They could just be around each other because she's a senator, so she's around all the time, or like a huge representative of Naboo. He's a Jedi who's moving through all these circles. They could have weird fucking sexual tension. Like they don't need to be just reintroduced to each other. So that could be a thing that's going on, and it's already setting it up. The way that Han and Leia have an Empire, like they already know each other and fight and bicker and have this tension. Like they could just open the movie arguing about shit. Right. Like that would be a way to set them because they want to parallel all this stuff.
Yeah. Totally.
And Attack of the Clones has some really nice parallels to it. Like if you think of Star Wars as being Arthur Pendragon's story, and Luke is King Arthur, and it's him going on this hero quest to get Excalibur and then rise up and defeat Mordred, except Mordred also happens to be Uther. Like this is Uther's story, and these are great details. Like losing the arm has this cool symbolism to it. Like sure, the ring theory aside, but it's Uther Pendragon, it's Arthur Pendragon.
Right.
Like, and that Uther turns into Mordred is just sort of a twist that they can do that makes the ultimate confrontation all the more real, since we're following Arthur as a young man, so him siring someone who he could fight wouldn't really happen, and that will ultimately happen now with Ben Solo. Like this movie already has great cool details to it, but it just doesn't do it well. And so what are the twists that you can make it work? And I think they love Empire. Everyone loves Empire. So like let's have Anakin be Han. Like he's a crazy badass pilot, and he's roguish and he's charming, and everyone goddamn loves him, even though they're all really mad at him all the time because he fucks up shit. And
but at the end of the day, he ends up saving everybody.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like if he's running around and he's got Obi-Wan who's just like doesn't know what the hell he did to be like stuck with this kid, and he's bickering with this administrator who they happen to have done a mission with a few years back, and she's all like somehow the person that they get thrown in with every time they have to go on a mission, like they're thrown in to go on diplomatic stuff, and she's the ambassador that he has to like be the bodyguard for or something like that. And I don't know, like,
and there's all sorts of sexual tension between Anakin, and he's trying to like teach Anakin to let go and and to not have attachments, and he sees this relationship,
right,
forming in front of his eyes, even though they're bickering. I mean, like, even when they're bickering, like, you can see the sexual tension between Leia and Han, and you can see it between Padme and Anakin in that scenario. That'd be really interesting, and that can start to create that wedge between Obi-Wan and Anakin.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
I'll tell you the other thing that I kind of wanted to do with this movie, just to make the third movie more interesting for me. I wanted to actually... I would have accelerated this movie a whole lot and gotten right to the end of this movie, Anakin and Obi-Wan having their duel and Anakin turning to Darth Vader. So setting up the third movie you have a complete movie with Anakin as Darth Vader and get to see Darth Vader in his prime badass.
I'll be honest, that's what I thought they were going to do when I saw Phantom Menace. I thought the third movie was going to be Vader hunting down the other Jedi.
Right. Because Order 66 was such...
Well, yeah, it's very dumb. I mean, I've often...
killed them all in a montage.
Like, what would have been a great sequence of movies is if episode 2 was episode 1 and episode 3 was split in 2, because the biggest problem with episode 3 is they have to rush through everything to catch up to all the Star Wars stuff that they skipped out on in the first 2 movies.
Yeah. So in a sense, you could have the Clone Wars be through all 3 episodes.
Yeah, I mean, the opening
based on the way we've talked about it.
The opening of the trilogy should have been the beginning of the Clone Wars. And then the Clone Wars was the backdrop for these 3 movies. And the fact that they didn't do that with the first one is why I say it's both ambitious but also poorly executed. Like, setting it up in the background could be cool, and like wanting to do this as like the beginning of the wars, like, also could be cool. Although it happens way too late. It should happen mid-movie that there's like attack of the clones happens. And then that should have been the thing that drives forward all of their action. Like that all of a sudden the status quo is disrupted and now they're at war instead of just being like the keepers of the peace and wandering around. Like you can argue that that's what they try to do, but they get it.
It gets bogged down with that whole like trying to figure out who ordered the clones and who are the clones and that whole mystery.
Why is it a mystery? Just have that technology.
Yes, that was completely unnecessary.
They've got goddamn back to tanks. You can grow basically arms back for people. Why is it that weird that there would be clones?
Right. For all this, you can travel faster than light.
like the idea that clones, like and I mean, part of this is me having like a love for the novels. So like having these like fast growing clones that are really unstable and don't last very long, like those, that shows a limitation of the technology. And then having these slow clones really requires an investment. Like the ones that they have in Attack of the Clones and in Revenge of the Sith really would require you to like invest 20 years before you'd have a reasonable force, or 10 because of fast aging. But like that 10 years is a lot of time to be like, well, someday we'll need them.
We're gonna need. We're gonna fight a war in 10 years.
So really, if you wanted to have the stakes properly, whichever side was the aggressor should have had the long running clones, because those are the reliable ones that you can trust. And then the side that is not the aggressor in the situation should have been the ones that were forced to break out all these clone tubes that can fast grow people that only last for like 9 months before they die. And that should have been this big war between clones. And not just here's robots and here's basically robots that we have that happen to have a human inside this white suit that we can't see their features. And they all talk the same and talk like goddamn robots because they've been just programmed.
The Clone Wars was disappointing. You could go in all sorts of different directions to redo that for sure.
And you can do cool stuff. Like we talked about Republic Commando being a cool take on it, and doing like a Vietnam style, like these people are going through PTSD at rapid pace because they're also aging super fast. Like there are cool stories you could do. But they didn't do it.
No.
And this isn't a bitch fest, so let's talk about what else would make it good.
Here's what else I would do. Maul Returns.
Yes.
Absolutely. Maul Returns.
All right.
Metal Legs. I love the idea of having Sidious find him and get him and put him back together, much in the same way that we see him do for Vader, but it's sort of like his practice run on what he does for Vader.
Foreshadow. I like that a lot.
So that would be cool. You may even get a scene where he says, Darth Maul, rise.
That would be cool. And I mean, that is what Grievous was in a similar sense, what could also be cool to do, like the parallels with Empire, is what if Darth Maul came back as an aggressive Force ghost? Because we haven't seen one of those in the movie.
Ooh, that's interesting.
And this would be the parallel to Obi-Wan showing up as a Force ghost in Empire for the first time. Like, what if Anakin or Obi-Wan, let's say Obi-Wan, because he actually met Darth Maul, whereas Anakin kind of saw him once.
Yeah.
Like, what if Obi-Wan was constantly hearing voices of Darth Maul, like taunting him throughout the beginning of the movie, and like mid-movie he's confronted with the ghost of Darth Maul. And like you get the glowing red ghost instead of the glowing blue ghost, because like why not? Like,
I like that.
And like you could even like sort of parallel the fight in the cave against this Force ghost, or just like them arguing or something to that effect.
The one thing I'm not crazy about that is I like the idea of the Force ghost being something only the light has, as part of Obi-Wan saying, I'll become more powerful in death, and not allowing the Sith to have that as a trade-off for how powerful they are because of the untapped emotion. But the thing is, a dark side Force ghost would be really cool.
But to counter argument that point, Palpatine's ability in all the later fiction that I'm going to feel free to reference when talking about the prequels, because the prequels are deeply steeped in all the expanded universe fiction. Yeah. Palpatine's ability to put his essence in other clone bodies that they rapidly grow was because he could keep his consciousness together with the Force. Like that, the Force ghost probably should be something where you have to be super strong with the Force, which, as all of us who have played Knights of the Old Republic know, you've got to be either really light side or really dark side. You can't be neutral. Right. Neutral doesn't get the good powers. So, so if you're light side, you can be a cool advisor Force ghost. And if you're super strong dark side, you can be a taunting tormentor demon ghost. So you can't show up to your friends to tell them good advice. What you can only do is show up to the people you hate just to be like, I fucking hate you.
Which would be a great Maul.
That would be a great Maul.
I have to come back to your moment when you're talking about, like, you know, the rise Lord Maul moment. I just all of a sudden thought, you know, Darth Maul asking, "Where are my legs? I'm afraid in your anger you lost your legs." No. my mind just had to complete that scene.
Hilarious. And there's just like a pair of pants in the corner.
Yes. Just a very lonely pair of just jeans.
All right, so here's a take if we want to do it kind of as the parallel structure. Yeah. Let's say that the Trade Federation from the first one goes off and goes completely rogue, and the movie starts with them trying to track them down, and we see giant robot walkers that then Anakin and Obi-Wan has to fight on, let's say, planet. I don't want to say desert planet, but I was trying to think different than Frost.
I think it would be kind of cool
volcano planet, just to set up that foreshadowing.
Actually, you know what I think would be cool, and this was, you know, going to Mandalore, I think would be really cool to let the final land battle take place on Mandalore, because you have the snowy vista, but you also can go with the fire and ice type of thing going with like a volcano. Yeah, exactly.
So the reason that they could be there is both sides kind of figure out that the Mandalores have been doing all this, and that the guy pulling the strings is on Mandalore, and so they converge to
right. And there was some also, like, going to the Art of Force Awakens book. I know obviously it's much later after the fact, but there was some really cool concept art of like a volcano snow planet type of thing, and it was just like a really just some really.
What about
cool,
like an ash world?
Yeah,
like that's probably what you're talking about, but like the world where they're like it's in the volcanic version of nuclear winter, where like all the volcanoes went off. So there's a lot of geological activity, like geothermic activity, but like the sky is like completely covered in like a dust cloud, and when you come down, it's like snow, but it's just ash everywhere.
That's
and just in the distance, like there's always those
snow.
things. Yeah. So they have to be in like protective suits that kind of look like the ones from Empire, but they're like cooling suits, and they have to like block, and they have a mask.
Breathing. I like that.
Breathing
That's
mask.
a really cool idea.
And so we get these giant robot walkers that they have to fight in some sort of speeder, and maybe, I don't know, trip them somehow. And
that's crazy talk.
And so they're probes being sent out.
Old movie Empire Strikes Back. Nobody?
No.
Nobody for a Civil War reference?
Hold on. Addy, come here.
I'm just making a Civil War reference, guys. Come on. Are you guys still butthurt over that?
What?
No, I wasn't butthurt about the fact that they did an Empire thing. I was annoyed because I'm like, he's a nerd. Of course he would know that movie.
And that they called it old. That's what I found offensive.
Yeah, I know.
Not even that he called it old, but he was like, this obscure, really old movie is the way he phrased it.
Right.
Like, not verbatim.
He didn't say obscure, but
he didn't say obscure. He's like, have you guys ever heard of that, or did you guys ever see that really old movie? Like, that was the annoying part about it. Not being like, hey guys, do you remember this old movie, Empire Strikes Back?
Jackass.
I would have hated him saying that too.
Sorry.
I wish I had left it alone, much like I wish you had. Okay, so they're on this ash world, and there's a big battle, and they're coming. I guess this is what the Separatists and the Republic. How do you guys feel about Grievous? I think Grievous should be introduced in this movie.
Oh yeah.
As a legit general and a force to be reckoned with, and I want to kind of see him face off with Mace Windu.
Well, I think now we're starting to get. I think at this point, so there's
a lot happening.
Well, we got to talk about how we want the third movie to play out if we're going to talk about the second one. Like that, you have to pitch basically the rest of the trilogy.
Right. Are we still maintaining what we had from our last episode?
No, because this is now a John Bar point.
That's true. Well, so I think there's one thing. So you've introduced Maul as sort of the foreshadower for Vader. So what is? I mean,
not if it's Force Ghost Maul.
Yeah. Well, that's true. Yeah, if you were talking about cybernetic Maul,
right,
as opposed to Force Ghost Maul, what is the point of Grievous then?
I think as a foil to Obi-Wan.
Okay.
As a continued foil.
You don't think
to Obi-Wan.
Maul would be that guy? As the continued foil?
I mean, the beauty of Force Ghost Maul is you can also have Grievous, and it doesn't feel like they're stepping on each other's multiple toes.
I like Grievous. I like introducing Grievous as a general in this movie and in this situation, and I kind of like having him being the counterpoint to. See, I would cast Mace Windu, especially if you're using Samuel L. Jackson in that role, as sort of like this. The
much more militant,
much more the militant side of the Jedi Order, exactly, and that whole like taking the idea of we're here to protect the Republic to the extreme, to the far right, and becoming very, very militaristic about it, very forceful about it, and doctrinal about it, and having him sort of being like kind of fighting with Grievous and Obi-Wan and Anakin being pulled into that fight as well. But I think the idea I would make instead of having Dooku as another apprentice of Palpatine, I would keep bringing Maul back to be the other Sith. I think that would be a much better use of him.
How about this? So we open with attack on this ash world, speeders. It's Anakin and Obi-Wan saving the day. Like them taking on these robots is them winning and like taking out this base. General Grievous still human, or not human, but alien. Like same species of as the Trade Federation. Like guys, so we can get rid of Newt Gunray. Is really frustrated, kills one of his aides, goes off in his super giant ship, and then everyone's like chasing after these guys throughout the movie, but they're on the run, and like the Jedi are winning, and like Obi-Wan or Mace is like super aggressive. Obi-Wan is hearing these voices that really freak him out every now and then, and he's wondering what it is, so he goes off to study. Meanwhile, Anakin is left with this really annoying person who's like overseeing it from the Senate, and they bicker all the time while they're like trying to chase down this one like ship that got away.
And nothing stops bickering like a good nickering, if you know what I mean.
Hi-oh, yes, indeed. So they're chasing down this thing, and it happens to be the Mandalorians that they're trying to chase. And they're like these mercenaries that have been hired by the Trade Federation, it seems. And the movie sort of follows that going on. Obi-Wan goes to confront his demons, which turns out to be actually the
Force Ghost.
Well, the Force Ghost of Darth Maul. And then finds out about as he leaves, he finds out about a meeting being held where at this point now, like really officially evil General Grievous, who is has murdered his subordinates who have failed him multiple times, Vader style, actually has a meeting with a good Jedi, which is Count Dooku, and they start the form the basis of this separation from the Republic, because Dooku has legitimate information and he's siding with people who are bad because it is desperate it's a desperate time, and he needs these bad people also to bring good people and to provide the firepower to like lead the way for all these systems to like break off from the Republic, which he has found out is under control. And this whole like chase down of the Trade Federation is just a scapegoat that they're using to or that Palpatine is using to perpetuate this thing. Like the movie structurally then resembles Empire, which is what they want, and which we do want. Like, we want the second movie to have that kind of structure, but it starts off looking really victorious, and then we realize it's actually all a failure. Like, they're the ones in pursuit of these people, and really,
right, their shoes on the other foot.
Exactly. Like, and this is the one where like Anakin, because he's separated from Obi-Wan, is like, no, you have to like go and destroy these people. It's like, no, those ones aren't the bad guys. They're just trying to like get away, and they're lining up with people who are probably bad guys, but we don't even really know because we're forcing it on them. Like, systems are like, we're abusing systems. Like, maybe there's a lot of destruction, not like war destruction, but like collateral damage destruction to systems.
Anakin is trusting Dooku at this point?
No. Dooku is actually a good Jedi who is separate, who has left the Order.
Right, so he's somewhat disgraced.
Obi-Wan is the one who sort of like finds himself tracking down Dooku, or like finding out about Dooku going to have this meeting. Anakin is the one who's sort of leading at Mace Windu's orders, is leading this pursuit of the Mandalorians and of Grievous.
Okay.
And ultimately they sort of collide as like Obi-Wan sort of explores what's wrong with the Force, but he can't quite figure it out. And Maul is like coming after him, but he's like exploring his own powers, and he realizes like that there's this weird imbalance, and he finds a person who has balance, and that's Dooku. Like, Dooku is a balanced Jedi, which is why he's got a green lightsaber, and like that he's not like so easily manipulated by either side, and he's the one who's trying to like lead them down the right path. And then that's when it starts off appearing to be like, I don't know what exactly I would do with it, but like the Jedi go too far, and that's where like open rebellion actually occurs. And call them rebels. Call the
separatist rebels.
Yeah, the separatist rebels. Like,
yeah, totally.
Like, who needs the terms to be different? Like, they are rebels, and then all of a sudden, like they're all leaving the Republic.
I like the idea of having the separatists as the basis for the rebellion.
Yeah,
I love that.
And then we can sort of follow the next movie where like the war's like opened up, but there's like some people at fault. Like, I don't know what I would do that the Jedi
it would have to
screw
be
up.
It would have to be Windu. Yeah. It would have to be Windu's like extreme aggression.
Right.
What
do we do? So what do we want to do with Yoda in all of this? Do we do anything with him? Do we even bother with him in this movie? I mean, well, he's already been introduced in Phantom Menace.
Well, I wouldn't let him fight.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, as cool as it, like, I remember when it first happened, I was like, I thought it was cool. Amazing. And now looking back, I'm like, it was kind of uncharacteristic of him.
Yeah.
It doesn't really make sense.
Like, in my machete cut, like, I immediately skipped the fight.
Well, let me ask you this. Does it make sense to have, would Yoda be part of the Jedi Order? Would he still be the head of the council?
Yeah.
It could be that he's dismissed as being too much of a pacifist by someone like Windu. Okay. And so he's actually reaching out maybe to his former apprentice, which is Dooku, and like trying to urge him not to go down the path of war. But Dooku's like, no, the problem is that you guys are on the side of wrong right now, and war is the only way for these people not to be under the thumb of the Sith.
That's an interesting. Okay, so in that sense, I think the justification makes sense for Yoda not to be fighting, because I think if for whatever reason he was still part of the council, it seems to make sense for him to still be part of the problem. And I think you can justify a fight if you have at some point Yoda realize later on in the series that he was wrong.
I would rather,
and that's part of why he goes into hiding.
If he was pushed into confrontation, I would much rather have him do it without a lightsaber and defend himself without a lightsaber and just use Force powers.
Just the Force.
Just to see just how incredibly powerful he really is with the Force.
Right.
and be able to, not just do force pushes. And
Well,
stuff like
and
that,
again,
but other types
we've
of
all
things.
seen the Red
That's
Letter
true,
Media
too.
thing where you talk about, like, does a lightsaber work when you're 3 feet tall and you have to jump around super crazy just to make it work? It doesn't. It doesn't. Like, the lightsaber is designed for humans.
Yeah.
Like, and not even that well. Like, that whole thing was just like, let's have some fun with Yoda doing this. We've all wanted to see it, except we didn't really. We were just told, like, haven't you always wanted to see Yoda fight? Not really. I remember
Never really thought about it.
I remember having a lot of arguments with people about, like, how powerful he would be with the Force and what he would do if he ever confronted Palpatine.
Right.
And it never came up to being lightsabers. Like, it was always Force stuff.
Was it more like the Senate fight?
Yeah, except
Not as lame. Not as lame.
I mean, that ultimately is the fight we kind of wanted to have.
Except it ended weirdly.
Yeah, and
there wasn't enough.
And there's a lot of lightsaber fighting. He was like hopping around and
that's true.
with the
There's a lot of
lightsaber.
lightsaber fighting, and they were only like using like 2 powers. Like Yoda
Force
only
push
ever
and
uses
pull.
the force push and pull and jumping around.
And force lightning.
Yeah.
And
force lightning from Palpatine.
Which again is a power that you use to torture, not a power you use to win a fight. Like,
Right.
it's just they're not being very creative with the Force when they do, like, oh, this is a thing we saw once before. Let's do the same thing again.
Yeah, just to pump it up a little bit. Yeah.
Like, it'd be more interesting if he was like in an actual fight in some sort of terrain, if he was causing earthquakes or causing things just to fall, or actual lightning, like just shooting lightning from his fingers is such a one note kind of power, and the fact that it's like, oh, I hit the level where I can do it is so annoying.
Yeah.
Or like what if it was really like mind bending and he grew, like he hulked out. Like he could make himself larger, not like a monster, but like just like really
it's kind
big.
of a funny. I've
like, oh my
seen
God,
that, and I'm just
like he just hulks out.
Well, but yeah,
purple shorts.
I don't necessarily know like what thing I would say is the best application, but I think the idea of limiting the Force to only a certain set of abilities is kind of annoying unless you put limitations on the Force beyond that. Like, I've seen things where it's like, oh, it's a technique to shoot lightning, but we never see that in the actual material. It's just like, oh, you got powerful enough, lightning all of a sudden shoots from your fingertips. Yeah. Like, oh, and you happen to be evil, lightning shoots from your fingertips. Like, it should be like, if you're gonna have lightning be a big thing and like a step that is like the logical step for them to get to, it's got to be like, oh, well, if you do this particular, if you're able to manipulate energy in this way, you've learned how to do this lightning thing, but it should be difficult if it's going to be.
And there should be steps. So there should be steps leading up to that you see. It shouldn't just be, and that's the one thing you get.
And we're
There's
seeing in
nothing
the
else.
extended universe, and we've seen it before, and we're seeing it again now in Rebels. Like Ezra has the ability to interact with animals, you know? So like you could have an Aquaman type of moment where like Yoda brings in some random animal to
or like
sweep
in the cartoon Clone Wars where they used like force bubble, like I forget the name of the amphibious one with like the dreadlocks. Like when he was underwater, he was like making like bubbles with the Force to like rip through stuff.
Kit
like,
Fisto.
Yes, that's it. Like the thing is, if the Force shouldn't be limited, maybe people are limited, and then I can understand if like, oh, the Force is limitless. If you are great with the Force, you could do everything, but we are humans and we are limited, and we don't know all the ways you can do it. So to do Force lightning, it is really complicated. You have to know how to like remove all the protons from all of the atoms right in front of you with the Force, so that a lightning bolt strikes out, or that you properly shift the motion of the air so that all of a sudden it becomes a little bit hotter on one side and a little bit colder on the other, and that creates static electricity. Like it has to be some, like if it's going to be like there's only so many powers we know how to use, that limitation has to be on the people side, not on the Force
or not
side.
even like a limitation. It's just that like certain people just have a talent in a certain area.
Yeah. Well, it sounds kind of like a Green Lantern ring, the way that they specialize each lantern in a different way, and they have their own flaw, like how their character kind of plays into it.
Yeah.
So
I'm sorry, you're talking about the spectrum?
No, I was talking more about how like the difference, the way Jon Stewart thinks versus Hal Jordan.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That I'm okay with.
Yeah. You're not a fan of the spectrum of
no, it's
another podcast.
The Rainbow Corps.
It is another podcast, but
gentlemen.
Mainly because it's too fanficky, and it kind of feels like the Sith, in a lot of ways. Like,
But yeah, so again, but I like the idea because when you come back to having the person be the limitation, then you get back to character focused stories, and as opposed to just like, oh, this is a guy who's powerful and is able to do these things. And that's because I think there's always this thought that Jedi are so powerful that they can do anything and they shouldn't be easy to kill. But when you put the limitation on, all right, this is what they're capable of imagining, or the moment that they lose focus, then of course you have much more. You have higher stakes,
right,
and you have actual character stories at that point,
right?
Or maybe they're not that powerful.
Well, what would be great is showing how powerful Anakin is by allowing him to do multiple things that we see Jedi struggling only to do one thing with.
Right.
You know, like we're like, you know, Ezra is able to communicate with animals, and so is able to, you know, throw lightning, and so is able to force push. You know, have Anakin able to do 2, maybe 3 of these things, whereas, you know, Jedi traditionally are only able to do 1, and only the most powerful have ever only been able to do 2. Anakin can do 3 as a very young Jedi.
Right.
Yeah.
To kind of like, you know, create that mythos around him, and again, create jealousy within the Jedi ranks of this guy, and also, you know, like fear of him. You know, like, wow, maybe he really is the chosen one, and you can, you know, and then you can kind of get away from the whole midichlorian thing.
I would have removed all references of the chosen one from the get-go. I mean, like,
you think so?
Yeah, I don't think it works very well. Like, it's
to bring balance to the Force.
It doesn't.
I like it.
I think that works for me because I think there's a hero complex that it gives Anakin, and that it puts a certain burden on him, so that it forces him down certain paths as well. And I
don't think it forces him. I think it tricks him.
Yeah, mentally he feels this burden of being someone who is more special than those around him.
I hear what you're saying. I've got 3 problems. One, they're never very clear what they're saying, and I understand that like them misinterpreting this prophecy, can lead to some of that. But they kind of change what they say throughout the course of the series. So
I think that's the nature of prophecy, though. Like if you go from a biblical standpoint, like prophecy is like always
changes every week.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, your interpretation could change, and that is problem 1. And okay.
But but if you go back to Lucas's sort of view on different religions, I think that like lines up perfectly. Like this whole idea of this, like who the Messiah is in a way. If you want to go down
and what his purpose is,
right?
You know, there's an interesting belief, and just to get kind of off topic of this, but there's an interesting belief that in a book that I'm reading right now is that Jesus came not to fulfill a Judaic prophecy, but to destroy it.
Right.
And you could have the same sort of misinterpretation of Anakin with he's the chosen one and he's coming to bring balance to the Force. No, he's coming to destroy the Jedi and the Sith and kind of ruin it all.
But you know, in the same moment, unify it. But yeah, sorry, go ahead with your other problems.
So that was point 1.
Yeah.
Point 2. It puts a lot of or projects a lot of things onto Luke that previously had not been there. The original Star Wars movies did not have that element of like, oh, you are the destined person. It was a hero's journey, certainly. It was a story of someone rising to a height that there was no one who had met that height in that current generation. Sure, but all of a sudden when you put it, and again, this kind of gets into like the problem of, oh, it all comes down to the Skywalker line,
right.
Like. It is frustrating to think that this like casts a shadow on Luke to live up to these, you know, broader religious expectations for any sort of future media. Like if we're going to have a talk about The Force Awakens now, it's hard not to picture Luke playing out part of this role of bringing balance to the Force, and maybe now he's going to shepherd in. He trained Ben Solo to be the great evil, and now he's going to train Rey to be the great good, and now they are in balance, and you know everything goes off in that direction. Like it puts a weird spin on what was previously a very simple story of boy finds the strength within himself to be a hero, finds out that he also has that strength due to his lineage to be the villain, and how he still like makes sure that he's still the hero.
I think, though, the moment you decide to go into Anakin's story in the prequels, though, you've already put those bigger expectations on Luke. Even without the Chosen One prophecy, it still becomes a matter of destiny as far as, well, his son is the only one who's powerful and who may be powerful enough to reach him in one way, whether it's through love or something else.
Well, it's always going to be destiny because we were coming at it from the angle of seeing the future and then going backwards.
Right.
But that doesn't mean it has to be destiny that the past also informs the future.
Right.
Like it doesn't have to be.
But going back to ring theory, yeah, it does. In the way Lucas has written these films and the way he's writing these
so
stories,
that millennia past inform the timeline of the prequels as well as 25 years
movies,
in the future.
Movies,
like we're not talking about like thousands of years in the future. We're talking about only 20-ish years in the future.
Yeah. But I think that that's sort of the cycle that Lucas wanted to create with this story, and you saw his attempts at it with the prequels. Of mirroring and echoing the same themes and ideas, because I think he does view it as sort of a Mobius strip of storytelling with this family of, the rise and fall of people and how they're all intertwined.
See, I don't think that lacking a prophecy about the matter invalidates that component. Like
it doesn't, but it does inform it.
Especially if you're...
Well, it puts a spin on it.
Especially if you're continuing with sort of this system of dogmatic Jedi, and this idea that it is very much a religion that's become defunct, that's become so doctrinally focused. I think adding a prophecy makes that...
Gives it a little mysticism.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this is my third thing, which is that it feels, and I don't care how well done it is, but it feels really lazy, and it makes the movies feel lazier than they necessarily need to be. And because I love Star Wars as a whole, where it is this distillation of cool ideas about sci-fi all boiled together, and you take Flash Gordon and you take King Arthur and then all of a sudden you've got a movie that ends with like someone blowing up a thing that looks like a moon but has a laser cannon. Like that's crazy and weird, and you can keep all of these elements of mysticism and of like a great parent who fell horribly and stuff like that. But I despite the fact that they have the Force and they have very active religious implications, the first three movies didn't have some of those things that were part of these legends that they are taking notes from. Mm-hmm. And so I don't feel that the introduction of those into the prequels made those movies stronger. And I think considering that we generally agree that the prequels are pretty bad movies, it sort of reinforces my view that it didn't make them stronger. The movies are fairly weak. King Arthur always had a story about, or was always going to be the once and future king that will come again someday, and that there's all these implications of that. And you could sure argue that, well, Uther had a destiny related to that. But Luke doesn't. Luke's story is 3 movies long at the time that we're talking in terms of canon. And that story sure had echoes to previous movies, but kind of the bent of doing a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away is that this is almost like here's a version of the story that doesn't need to have some of the backstory of Christian myth and modern history.
I understand that. I get that, but I like it. Yeah. To be honest with you, that was one of the things I was really kind of excited about with these prequels. And then I agree with you, those movies sucked. But I think it was because they didn't give us any of that where it made sense. I think you're right. I think the Chosen One prophecy is lazy, and I think it is kind of lazy is the best word for it. But I think it makes sense in the context of the Jedi, and I think it would, and kind of what you were talking about with the Jedi being dogmatic and the Jedi kind of getting off track and away from the mysticism of a religion, because the things and we see this in Christianity today, especially in America, of getting away from the mysticism and really holding on tightly to the dogmatism
and the doctrinally,
and the doctrines of it. And I think what really made that interesting is if we had seen the Jedi Order being weakened by that, by getting away from these prophecies and this mysticism that's been, and having maybe Yoda being part of that mystic tradition and being more of a mystic Jedi,
right,
and Mace Windu being the more dogmatic
the Valar
Jedi, yeah, and then so that's how you create.
And then Anakin's the instinct. Okay.
All right.
Sorry, I had to throw that in there.
But see where you're lining up.
Because here's the thing.
Team Red all the way.
The fact that it is a story that is not tied into our modern setting.
Yes, it allows it to escape some of that
frees
stuff.
it from requiring that implication.
It doesn't require it, but I think it makes it relatable, and I think it makes it cool. I think it does, because I think if you take it too far away and you take it too far out of what we're familiar with, and you take too many of those elements out of it, I think it ends up being just really weird sci-fi.
And I think there was always a familiarity to Star Wars as well, as much as it is, the pastiche of other movies, but also some really cool and weird out there stuff. I mean, there is, obviously the Nazi imagery and the stormtroopers and all that fun stuff, and then all painted on the backdrop of the Cold War at the time. I mean, I think that all plays into it as well. So I think, with the prequels, early 2000s, you're starting to deal with more disillusionment, further disillusionment in government and in institutions at that point. I think that's, it makes sense for what the prequels were trying to do. It just, again, they're very poorly executed.
So I had an interesting thought that I don't know if this really. We've totally moved away from making episode 2 better. But so here's an interesting thought that came to me while you're saying that. So one of the weird conversations to have about the original Star Wars movies is the first one came out in the 70s, and then the next two came out in the 80s, and the sort of view of the world kind of shifts between those movies.
Yeah.
Like Star Wars is a much more, I don't want to say hippie because it's the wrong decade, but there's
a little more free flow,
a little
more disco to it.
Yeah, exactly. And then you get to the 80s and you're starting to get into the Cold War being much more omnipresent, whereas it was not quite so much during the 70s. The 70s, it felt a little more distant, in that the big war that people were still thinking about was World War II, and it quite the generation that grew up of the Cold War hadn't quite come into their own yet.
Right.
Episode 1 came out before 9/11. Episode 2 came out after it, but didn't really have the chance to be too impacted by it, but still was but there is a split there. And episode 1 has the feeling of the problem of the 90s, which was there was a thought that we were at the end of history, that with no superpower to challenge America and to see this sort of capitalist world kind of come to fruition, it was thought that the only way we would fall was completely from the inside, and that's
which
episode
is proving
1
to be true.
Well, not completely, but episode 1 is that story. It's about the government being twisted from the inside. And episode 2 goes back to having sort of an outside power, but that. So I wonder, I wonder if these movies are a little more timely than we give them credit in that regard.
Probably,
because it's interesting to think about. By the time we get to episode 3, there's religious extremists, and we're putting that. And when we're having this talk about how to make the movie better, we can't help but put that element.
But
we
are Osama bin Laden was already actively a terrorist well before 9/11.
Yes, but he wasn't omnipresent in the American consciousness.
No, but I think for people who were paying attention to the problem, the Middle East was a big deal. The peace talks in Israel were a major deal with Clinton. I think the middle, and you had the first Gulf War already in the early 90s. The Middle East was a rising. It was already an issue in the 70s if you really go back to it.
Yeah,
in the Cold War. So,
but again, it wasn't an omnipresent shadow cast across people. The Cold War was a thing in the 70s, but it does not cast a shadow over the first Star Wars the way it does Empire and Jedi.
Right. That's fair. Yeah. Well, that's an interesting thought there.
I don't know what my thesis is for that. It's just it came to me when you said that, and I'm like,
think
that's
it's
weird.
obvious that is the case. That the times influence the story that is told and how it is told. If for no other reason, then we kind of see it through that lens. And so it informs the decisions that were being shown, and we kind of see things differently based upon how we view it. So I think you're absolutely right. I think that we've got a lot here. I think we've done a lot of really good ways to fix this movie.
Yeah,
and make a really
and I like that.
movie.
Honestly, I do like that we kind of delved into the philosophy behind what motivates this movie. I think that's taking it to another level other than just plot. So I like that we made this sort of deep cut into sort of the history of the time as well and how that reflects into the movie.
And frankly, we knew this movie was going to be the most divisive in terms of ways to make it work properly.
Yeah.
Because the second we get into our pitches for episode 1, where we then have to pitch the whole trilogy, you're going to give a pitch that that sounds really good. Your pitch. That sounds really good. Your pitch. That sounds really good. We're hamstrung, but we're not stuck.
Yeah.
Like episode 3, we're like, how to make it better. Here's all my ideas. Those work really well with my ideas. Your ideas?
Because
they work really well.
So many different directions you can go.
You still only have 2.5 hours max that you can do to make it work. Meanwhile, here we've got 5-ish hours.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because when I was putting mine together, I was kind of like thinking, oh, okay, so my pitch for episode 3 still kind of maintains true. So I was trying to tie it. Yeah, I was trying to tie it in, sort of in a backwards way. So anyway, so we'd love to hear what ideas you have for episode 2. Do you hate our ideas? Do you like our ideas? Do you have some ideas of your own? What's your sort of philosophy of how, the lens that we would look at episode 2 in the times, different plot ideas, different character arcs. You can let us know. Again, just go to our website, certainpov.com. You can get in touch with us: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, email. All of that is on our website, certainpov.com. And until next week, stay scruffy, my nerf herders.
Thanks for listening to Certain Point of View. Don't miss an episode. Just subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on iTunes. Head over to certainpov.com.
Hey.
Oh, hey, Jeff.
What's going on, guys?
Oh, talking about Superman.
Oh, cool. I could talk about Superman.
I could talk some more about Superman.
We know.
I'll bet a few people would want to get in on this.
I'm down.
You know it.
That sounds like fun. I'll do it.
Cool, let's do it. We can call the show Men of Steel.
And you can find it at certainpov.com.
Or wherever you get your podcasts.
Yay.
And we're back.
Yes, we are.
So, Sam.
Oh.
Memory Lane.
That's
a time before you were part of this network.
Yeah, it's a beautiful,
what did you think?
Beautiful episode. Okay, so definitely, absolutely, feeling Dooku being good. Like you all sold me on that. Like I think you make him like the founding of a rebellion. You make him this separatist thing that lives in a gray area. I mean, I think that's the thing is that the original films are allowed to be like good and evil, black and white kind of thing, right? But I think it would be nice in these films for there to have been more complication. And I think it always kind of sort of was scratching at the surface of that, but it didn't commit to it. And I think as I listen to these, I feel like that is a main issue with it, right? Like they always want to be like, oh, there's twists and turns, but there's no actual twists and turns. Like people are kind of exactly what you thought they were all along. And so I feel like, yes, I totally agree with what you guys said about him. I think that he should be living in that gray area, a separatist who is going to be part of the rebellion. You don't even have to. I know, like, all of you said, oh, let's, just call them the rebellion. You don't even have to do it the whole time. You could call them the rebellion towards the end. You can have someone, label them and be like, oh, that's the start. Oh, shit. Here comes the rebellion. Right? So I think that's fine. I also agree with the Yoda take. I don't think Yoda should have fought. I think he should have had crazy force abilities. And if there was a fight, I thought actually it might be interesting to have the fight be part of him being, kicked off the council or removed from his place of power. Maybe even like a hostile takeover by Mace Windu of the whole order. Kind of go to that other extreme where it's like, no, I'm doing what's right. I'm protecting the Republic. I'm investing in this. This is war. Your way of just sitting back and waiting is not going to happen. And having Yoda decide, like having him decide he's not going to continue the fight. Like having him basically be close to winning, but then walking away. Because it almost makes more sense as to why Yoda would be in hiding on some planet later on. I guess they wouldn't like that, though, because then he would not be in the last movie. So,
well, this would be the start if you wanted to kind of have him carry through into the next movie. Yeah, we were very harsh on Mace in this one. I think we all were like, because it was such a weird throwaway, which is that Sam Jackson wanted a purple lightsaber. Like he just like said that as like one of his terms, and it also says "badass motherfucker" on it apparently.
Amazing.
And, that was just the thing that he said he wanted going into this movie. And there's all this, like, backfill of canon that supports it as being like, oh, it is a balance of light and dark, which is why it's like a blue lightsaber and a red lightsaber together. And all this. And that he's, like, a master of the most forbidden arts, or, like, the ones that, like touch on the dark side.
Yeah.
And we really glommed onto that idea where it was like, all right, let's give Sam Jackson like a more extreme part and like, actually kind of turn him into not exactly the villain, but like certainly an antagonist to the good guys in this situation.
Well, I think actually it's perfect because I think that there are people who truly believe that they're doing the right thing and that they're truly righteous. And I think that in Mace's mind, in this version of it, he is good. He is doing the right thing. He's not tampered by anything. He's just doing what needs to be done to continue the Republic the way that he believes it should be going. And I think sometimes the most compelling villains / non-villains are the kind of villains that really truly believe in their cause and believe that it is the right thing. And believe that they're good. And so I don't know if I necessarily paint him as a villain. I just paint him as aggressively on his own side.
Villain might be too harsh there. Like I said, like more of an antagonist. Like
right. Yeah.
I think that we all kind of took him as being like almost like a General Patton, like a real hawkish figure.
Yeah.
Just so that we could have someone like that in the Jedi Order, which we don't see in the movies that we were presented with. But we know it has to be there, right?
Which, by the way, the person who could definitely pull that off is Sam Jackson. He's the person who could pull off this idea of a person who can seem calm and cool and collected on the outside and have a fire within him. And I think that that's what you need to kind of pull that kind of antagonist off. You need to be able to very calmly be like, no, this is the right thing. Now let's go kill some kids. Just kind of deliver that. And Sam Jackson can give that to you because we've seen him do that kind of thing in other movies. We've seen him be that person in other movies where he's comfortable kind of living in that space that is not like truly good, but believes in a higher cause. And he's, he's good at that kind of stuff. And I feel like in these movies, he's wasted. He's got a cool purple lightsaber and he sits around and he kind of nods. And I just feel like it's a waste of it. And if he were, I really loved the idea of having in this film, which is something I think you brought up, having Anakin and Obi-Wan separate. And in that way, having Mace kind of, have Anakin following Mace's orders and kind of like finding kind of glory there. Because I feel like the other thing is being greedy for acceptance and glory and that kind of stuff can also lead you down the dark side path. So I feel like that was really good. I think that would be something that'd be interesting, because all of this time he's kind of been in this fold where like Obi-Wan is like a brother and also a parent and a mentor and almost his entire world. And so to have Obi-Wan go off on another journey, and that journey could actually be set off by Yoda, like asking him to go find Count Dooku. I don't know why he's been sent away, but that could be part of it. That could be like, you know, you need to seek out, because if the Jedi Order continues to fracture the way that it is, things are going to get worse. So I need you to go to these separatists and go find out what's happening, because Mace, on the other hand, is doing all sorts of crazy stuff. And I need you to help me, Obi-Wan, because you're still rooted and kind of balanced. And so leaving the kid behind, because you can't necessarily take him because it's a very secretive mission. And then, you know, that's when Anakin finds glory like that. And that can lead him to kind of meeting Palpatine and meeting the counselor and like, oh, yes. Oh, you're so interesting. Oh, I'm interesting? Yeah, hell yeah, I'm interesting. Finally, someone who appreciates me. So I think that would be really, you know, really something that is way more interesting than what we saw in this film. How the love story fits in, though. And I know you guys kind of like, it's very hard to fix, okay? Like that, it's a very awkward part. And I know that you said in this episode, we've just jumped forward, they're already dating.
Well, we spitball a few ideas. I suggested that as one way to handle it. Another one was have them already be familiar with working with each other and treat it like a Han and Leia situation.
Yeah.
Which I come back to liking more and more. Like, there's no reason that, like, they have to have, like, not seen each other for years. You know, he could have just grown up around her, and maybe, you know, that's why there's, like, friction. Maybe she always treats him like her kid brother, and that bothers him, but he's also, like, super into her.
Yeah. All of that always bothers me. You know how I feel about this relationship and the first movie. So.
Oh, yeah. Again, Jake Lloyd, like, God bless. I realize he went through some shit for it, but, like, casting a boy who was too young for the part in a part that was awkwardly written to begin with, and then all of it's just poorly written, is bad. And it sucked. And like, there's going to be a mark against the character forever because of that.
Yeah. So I think like last time we talked, we kind of you touched on, I don't know if it made it into the episode or not, but we touched on the fact that like, part of the thing of the love story in this particular film is that he's the one who's truly pursuing her. Like, he's pretty aggressively hitting on Amidala. And you said that it would have been more interesting, and I feel like this is true. It would have been more interesting if she was, like, kind of more into him. The only problem I have with it is because the first movie's casting.
Right.
It feels creepy. It feels like grooming to me, and I don't like that. So I feel the only way to really fix it is to have them re-meet, have them bump heads, because you have to erase childhood Anakin from her brain. She's got to re-meet him as an adult. Like, she's got to, like, because if not, then it's just, I mean, it's still kind of creepy no matter what, but it's extra creepy if she watched him grow up. So I feel like they have to re-meet, but it's okay for them to re-meet on a mission and bump heads on the mission, and then have some sort of, like, I don't know, you're going to have to use a romance trope of them being in danger and saving each other and finding care. I don't know how this fits into everything, but probably where he finds glory under
Wait. I got it.
Okay, you do?
We got an enemies to lovers.
Yes, it's enemies to lovers, yes.
We do an enemies to lovers where she does not want a war situation and he is hawkish because he's being influenced by Mace Windu. and that's why they're button heads, and then she gets kidnapped and he rescues her, or something to that effect, you know. So like some situation
I'm sure
that like brings them together.
I'm sure there's a cave somewhere. Someone's got a fever. I'm not sure which one. And then they realize they care for each other from all of their banter, and then we're good. And Secret Wedding can still happen at the end once he's found glory. Once the Emperor has he won't tell the Emperor still, like, because he's learning to lie to everyone, but he will feel emboldened to do something behind the Jedi Order's back because of the ego push that he's gotten from Mace, and also especially from Palpatine. And that's how I'd fix that. And it would be minimal love scenes, you know. It would be where it counts, you know. Also the lines would be better, and it would be where it counts.
Yeah, one of the challenges here is also just being like, we're just saying, oh, just have a better script, like just write better dialogue.
Yes, just overall.
Which is a true part of taking another pass at a script, but it's difficult to do on a podcast.
Exactly. Like, we're not here to rewrite entire scenes. Like, that's not going to happen. But I do think, in general, that structure, by allowing the movie to be, at its core, more political, just within the Jedi world, you know, not even mirroring anything else, but allowing this gray area of the formation of the rebels, which is the separatists, allowing the Jedi Order to become corrupted in this, or show corruption in this movie, so that you really see the breakdown of what's happening, and kind of a split, right? This is a split of a church. These are some people who have this power and they're leaving, and then there's like these people who are staying and becoming zealots. They're becoming very fanatical under Mace. And you've got a leader like Yoda, who was more calm and more pacifist, being completely booted and kicked out. And you've got Obi-Wan and his Padawan in the middle of it, being ripped apart. Their relationship, you can see the cracks in this version that I see in my head, that is pieced together from all the debates you just had. You can see the cracks begin in their relationship and start forming, because while Obi-Wan is following this old path, which is Yoda's path, no one in the Jedi Order is following that path anymore, right? They're either joining the Separatists and leaving the Order altogether, or they're becoming fanatical about supporting the Republic and everything that it means to be a Jedi, and doubling down on all of the rules. And so you have Anakin doubling down, but then as he doubles down, he's also being corrupted and seduced by the dark side, with his ambition. And then you have Obi-Wan still following Yoda, but ultimately, honestly, like, exiling himself along with Yoda, because there is no place for him anymore. Like, even in the last movie, even though he's still on the fringes, there would be no place for him really within the Order anymore. And that would be something that he would deal with, which would be really interesting in the last movie, because he wouldn't realize that to the last movie, that the Jedi Order is dead. But this is when it starts dying. This movie would be the first, you know, stab in the heart, and the last movie would be the rattle, like just the last rattle of the Jedi Order, just done. And I think that would be really, really interesting. That would take this to a really, like, because everything you said in the middle, it can totally be fun, right? You've got the big battle, you've got Anakin saving Amidala, you've got Mace, you've got him being a hero, you know, kind of like how Luke is here. You can have a medal ceremony. Fuck, let's give Anakin a medal. Like, let's do a whole ceremony in the middle of the movie. Let's have Amidala put it on his neck. You know, like, let's have, like, all of that happen. Like, them be like, wow, you're amazing. You know, like, you did this, you saved things. They can even save Naboo. Like, you know, I don't listen, I'm not getting rid of the Gungans. I know that they're kind of minstrelly, and I don't appreciate that. But, they exist in this world, and I'm not here to hate on Jar Jar ever. I feel bad about Jar Jar. We'll get into that when we talk about the first movie.
Yeah, and the Gungans you can do some fun stuff with. Like, not to toot my own horn, but Slippery Jim is my main NPC character in Scruffy Nerf Herders. And he is a smuggler Gungan who is just great to have, a badass pirate, but be a Gungan.
Exactly.
And it works.
See, and that's all that matters, And so I feel like you could have done a great thing there. You could have had an entire, thing. You know what? I'm gonna put Jar. I know people hate him. I'm gonna put Jar Jar back in this movie. Just a cameo. He's somewhat. He is Queen Amidala's assistant now. He takes notes, and he files things.
He's her bag man.
He's grown up and he knows how to do stuff now. He's a personal assistant and he's wonderful at it.
Yeah, if he had no lines, he just brought coffee or tea every scene. Every time they sat down to do anything, he drops down to the little tray, and
it would be amazing. You'd be like, "Look, he's redeemed. Okay, he's not as clumsy," and he'd be like, "Hiya," and then he'd leave, and that'd be it. And and he would be absolutely redeemed. So, yeah, that is my another pass. I'm going to stick Jar Jar Binks back in this movie.
One thing you said about Anakin losing his arm the way that he does in the movie made me think about how they rewrote the loss of Aquaman's hand in Justice League Unlimited, where instead of it being in a fight, they made a decision to have him actually cut off his own hand as a way of freeing himself so he could save his son. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking about how that actually could have been kind of cool if Anakin took a wound specifically in the service of protecting Amidala.
Yeah.
It was something that he stepped in the way of, or he lost it because he had to cut it off. What if he cut off his own arm?
Yeah.
And the contrast there is that this is a moment where an act of good was part of this eventual fall of him becoming less and less human, becoming more machine than man. It's good intentions at the beginning for him. In contrast with Luke, where it is actually... Well, for one thing, it's his own father doing the cutting. And it is a part of battle, and it is a little bit more of random chance. And it's he doesn't need to glom on to the reasons why he did it. Luke, it just happened while he was fighting, and it sucked. But, there's a lot of terrible shit that happened in that fight. But, losing the hand ultimately was the least, mentally shattering for him. It was a war wound. He's got a fake hand by the end of the movie. It's fine. But for Anakin, it should be one where he actually almost feels I took this wound for you. I am less of the man than I used to be because of the things here. It must have meant something. It must have been for something, really emphasize some element of PTSD in pushing him along this path where he has to really try to be no, I can't have made a mistake. I lost my arm for this. It can't have been a mistake.
Yeah.
I love you. I love the Republic. I did all this stuff for all of us. I sacrificed so much. You can't tell me to just throw it all away because Sidious is behind, you can't tell me to throw it all away because Palpatine's behind the whole thing.
Right, exactly. And I think that would be amazing too. I almost said swoon, but also when you're and then he cut off his arm to save her, and it was oh, swoon. I was wait, no, not really. Please never mutilate yourself for your partner.
But there are scenes in the movie that we got where that could have worked. He could have done it to get free when they're in the pit. And man, I don't think we talk about the pit in the actual episode.
No.
But man, that's an episode where it was clearly Lucas had seen Gladiator a year earlier and was oh man, this is really good. We should put this in my movie.
Yeah, clearly. It was definitely a Gladiator vibe kind of thing. I think also for this particular film, I feel or for this particular series, I feel Lucas did a lot of borrowing from the Bible and borrowing from tropes in that way. And so I feel early Christians were often thrown into gladiator pits. And I feel there's a lot of stuff that he's trying to do with this prophecy of the one and with having Amidala almost seem just so pure all of the time. Yes, she fights, but she's just... she's good. She tries to resist his advances. She tries to which all of that drives me nuts because she's older than him and which we know, which is creepy, but she's older than him. She's more experienced than him.
Again, it's only supposed to be 2 to 4 years.
Yes, I know. But she's older than him. She's more experienced than him. She's an actual politician. She has been running her country since she was a teenager. This is not a person who should be shy or kind of ignorant of the way that things work at all. And I have very many problems with her character and her lack thereof of development and kind of shallow empowerment that is kind of sort of thrust upon her. But, because in this movie, she kind of gets to fight. She kind of gets in on the action. But, I don't know. It just doesn't matter because she doesn't have the agency that she should have. She's not the badass that they want her to be. They paint her as a badass, but she's not actually a badass. And I feel bad. I don't know. I feel like Natalie Portman has enough moxie, but they just paint her. She's just a doll. She's just the way they write her is she's a very pure, wonderful, lovely doll that Anakin can love because she's just so pure and lovely.
Yeah, unfortunately, these movies were too much in the phase of lightsabers kind of dominating pop culture. This is right around the time people realized that they could do their own lightsabers in videos that they made. So fan films were becoming huge for that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
It was just so dominating. And there's so many fucking lightsabers in all of these things.
Yeah, so many. It's lots and lots of jousting.
But the downside is that means that most of the major characters who are good combatants are lightsaber people. There's no she uses a gun a little bit, but all the action scenes we care about are lightsaber fights or people with lightsabers defending themselves from people with guns.
I mean, but here's the thing. I would have just taken her being actually being a badass senator. And I know that this means that they would have to actually work on this script.
Yes.
But the truth is that there's more than one way to be brave and to be capable. And I think that the first set of movies does that very well with Leia. And I think that the last set of movies, even though they are flawed, does a good job doing that with characters that do not have the Force. These movies did not do that. And especially for Natalie Portman's character, especially for Queen Amidala, she literally is she's just a mother. She's just the vessel that will one day carry the twins. And it always bothered me. It still bothers me, clearly. I've seen this movie once, and I am having very deep feelings about this. It has always bothered me, and I feel like if the script was written in a way where it was enemies to lover, where they meet again, and she is staunchly anti-war, there's got to be a way, because in the first movie, she is definitely, she wants to have discourse, right? She's always saying, no, we need to talk this out. No, we're going to talk this out with the Federation. So she still staunchly believes in discourse. We can still have her believe that. We can still have them argue about it. And we can still have her, maybe after he cuts off his hand to save her from whatever it is, she's the one who bandages him. She's the one that takes care of him overnight. She's the one that supplies the medicine. That's still badassery. That is still capability. But she's not really portrayed as terribly capable. Yes, she has a gun, and strategically a midriff appears at some point, and she's got a different outfit, and she's running around, and she's being active. But she's being active a lot of the time without substance because the script doesn't give her substance, and then really she's just there for the romance. And that always pissed me the fuck off.
Yeah, I feel like with a movie that opens with people trying to assassinate her, they should really have her be important to the later parts of the plot in this episode.
Yeah.
And it kind of isn't.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like if the movie opened in media res and we got like a cool action beat off the bat, as opposed to like the ship blows up kind of thing, which is like kind of boring. Like sure, it's an explosion, you know, it's an assassination, yada yada yada, but it's not any of the main characters, and all it does is be like, oh, someone's out to kill you, and then, man, all of the assassination attempt scenes in this movie are not particularly good or exciting, and kind of don't make sense.
Yeah.
And
again,
man, I wish there was a scene. You know, we talk about like, well, what if this was already in the Clone Wars? Because like it could have just spilled over from the conflict with the Separatists in the first movie, or like with the Trade Federation, or it could be building up, you know, even further, and it's about to explode. Like,
right.
Like there's battles all the time as like different groups are like really frustrated. But you know, this movie choosing to end the movie with like we're going to open the Clone Wars as it is. You know, the major political figures outside of Palpatine don't really have a hand to play in why it happens. And then we don't see a lot about why these people want to leave the Republic.
Yeah.
You know, they don't have like a listed, you know, set of grievances.
There's no protest at all. I mean, come on.
Right. Yeah, right. Like there's no thing that's like driving them forward. There's nothing about it where it's like, oh, the Republic is preventing us from our way of life, or it's limiting us. It's, you know, protecting our enemies, you know, whatever reason. None of that is here, which is kind of a bummer.
Right.
And it would have been nice to have an influential political figure who's one of your main characters who could sort of explore those themes.
Yeah. And again, I get it. The assassination attempt is the lazy writing way. And I'm sorry, I feel so guilty saying this because I know people worked on it. But it's a lazy writing script to make sure that these two characters get to hang out with each other, right? Yeah. It's the excuse that happens so that Anakin, a Jedi, has to be assigned to be with her to protect her. Which, again, we don't know why she's that important because they don't really expand on, like, what it is that Naboo's holding on to. Like, at least fully. I think the biggest problem, and we're touching on it right now, is that this movie is trying to be political without getting into politics.
Right.
It's trying its best to be as political as possible without giving political reasons. Because, guys, political reasons are things that affect people. When people say, I don't talk politics because I just talk to people, politics affect people. That's why politics is important.
Yeah, it's of the polis.
Right, it's of the polis, the population of the people. Like, it affects the people 100%. It may not affect you, but it definitely affects someone. So here's the thing. We don't know what the stakes are for the rest of this universe. We don't know, really. There's like whisperings here or there about stuff, but we don't see what's happening underneath all of these other things. Like, is the Federation skimming off the top? Are people starving because of it? Are they creating these clones? Are they stealing people to create the clones? Like, are they stealing DNA? Like, I know, like, the Jango Fett thing. But, like, let's say that, like, there's, like, an actual, like, human trade trafficking thing going on. Or, like, a alien trade trafficking going on. That cloning has become like a really big business, that it's illegal, that people are being kidnapped because of it. I don't know. The stakes just have to be higher. There has to be real reasons and why her specifically, what it is about her and her voice that is so threatening to the people who want this to continue or want, whatever status quo in the universe or fascism to rise in the universe to continue. What is she doing specifically instead of just hiding on a planet? What is she doing specifically that is basically making her good trouble? How is she John Lewis of this universe?
Or alternatively, how is she being prevented from interfering in plans? Like, in this, we've got the whole, like, Jar Jar gives the speech to, like, give emergency powers to Palpatine. And the argument is that they wanted Amidala away so that he could be manipulated. But it seems like, well, I mean, he could have manipulated anyone else. He's the Chancellor. Like, sure, Naboo is where he's from originally, but he could manipulate anyone. He manipulated Amidala in the first one.
Yeah.
You know, like, I don't see that, like, it has to be Jar Jar Binks to do it. I enjoy that it's Jar Jar Binks that does it, but that's its own thing. Like, I feel like Amidala has to have, like, an objective of her own, and that's actually me saying that part out loud is the thing that it's kind of frustrating. She's not like working towards a cause within the Republic. She's not trying to make the peace talks work. Like, she's not involved with any of those things. She's just like, oh, she's a little bit too crafty and I can't manipulate her anymore because she's 18 now instead of 14 back in the day when I could talk to her and make her think that this was a good idea. Yeah, like that's sort of it right there. Like, yeah,
you've got like it's, and this is like an overall, like, this is not just the problem with Amidala. Like, this is the problem with the film overall. You don't really, they never flesh out the Separatists, so they don't really talk about the issues with the Jedi Order. They wait for a supplementary. And you know how I feel about that. Like, I just feel like if people are going to spend money to see things in a movie, you can expand on it, but it should be touched on in this movie. This movie should begin the schism. This movie should show you the corruption within the Jedi Order. This movie should show you them kind of just breaking apart and breaking down. And that way, in the final film, when the Jedi Order can do nothing to stop the tides, you know why. You know why. Because you've already seen the beginning of them not being able to even be together as one team, right? A house divided cannot stand. Well, this house gets divided, and it should be in this movie, and that should be pronounced. That should be like something that happens in this second movie. This movie should have gotten terrible reviews for being too dark and political. That's what this movie should have gotten. Be like, why did they do this? Why are politics in my sci-fi? That's what should have happened for this film.
Yeah. So let's move on from the main cast, which, you know, we talked to death about in the episode. And what did you think about some of the ways that we were like playing with like the clones parts of things? Like, I'd propose like, well, what if it was two different types of cloning techs, but both were using cloning as their solution to be at war, or clones versus like Mandalorians as a whole, rather than like all the clones are clones of Jango Fett, but be like, oh, we actually have the Mandalorian, like them, this ancient enemy of almost the Federation, them, this ancient enemy of the Republic, like coming and actually being the catalyst for the war. And then the Republic defends itself by rapidly cloning things. And this could, you know, I referenced the Thrawn trilogy where they actually do clone Jedis, which could have been kind of cool. But even if you're not doing that and you're just cloning soldiers, you know, having them be rapid and weird and kind of broken could have all been really cool things. And I know that, like, look, I love the Bad Batch. I love the stuff that I've seen from Clone Wars. I've finally started watching it, so I can actually talk about some of that now. Like, it's cool stuff that they've done in this universe, but, like, you know, like, if you're gonna call it the Clone Wars, the clones should have been kind of freaky, as opposed to just like, oh, you fought in the war with all the soldiers in the white armor that are still out there. Like, it's just different people under that white armor. Like, have something that makes the clone part stand out to everyone.
I agree. I agree on a lot of the things you guys said. Honestly, it would have been super fun to have Mandalorians come in, I think, and just spice things up. Like, honestly, I really wanted a real like chaotic war in this film. I think, because, you know, when I was younger and before these movies came out, I guess I was younger when these movies actually came out, but when I was younger before these movies came out, you know, I read a lot of the novelizations and comics and stuff like that. And the Clone Wars were very interesting. And there were a lot of different takes from a lot of different writers about things that, you know, could have happened. And I think that they missed out on a lot of opportunities, kind of just making a small adjustment to basically the uniform and deciding to clone Jango Fett over and over and over again. I mean, like, what makes his material so superior that would be the only soldier you want? I don't know if they fully ever explained that. Again, didn't want to rewatch this movie. So I do think that it would be really interesting. I also think it'd be kind of interesting to have, like, competing teams, you know, like, yeah, bring the Trade Federation back in. Maybe have, like, 2 people making different kinds of clones. You can still keep the Jango Fett clones then, and then have a different set of clones, upgraded clones, you know, like, make this an actual war of clones. Maybe actually get the Jedis creating clone Jedis to fill out their ranks to fight the clones. Like, make it so that everyone is playing with this thing that may or may not go against nature. Like, I don't know. I feel like they didn't play enough with that part of it. And you're right, it's the Clone Wars, so let's make sure that the clones look like clones and not just stormtroopers with a different helmet.
Yeah, like, have the clone part matter in conversation about it.
Yeah. Have clone lives matter or not matter, you know? I mean, like, I think, because here's the thing. I think that there would be a certain amount of people who would think that clones are unnatural. And, like, that's a pretty fair thing for someone in any universe to be like, wait, but that didn't come from another being? I feel like that's not okay. Because we definitely have that reflected in our own universe. There are definitely people that every time a goat gets cloned are like, look at what they're doing, you know? And Jurassic Park is, like, kind of like a, we can, but should we kind of question. So I think that it would be fair to bring that into this universe, and maybe that's one of the things that Amidala is against. She is standing up against people creating the clones. Again, there just needs to be, like, there needs to be better stakes. more than just Anakin turning to the dark side, because I feel like we are affected by the environments we grow up in. And honestly, this could be, you could add another layer of being like, this is interesting to kind of examine nature versus nurture, right? But the thing is that within Anakin, there has always been the ability to be either light or dark. Always, right? And that's true of all peoples and beings and all people with the Force, right? Because you have to fight against going to the dark side, and going to the dark side is easy. So, you know, if you give into your anger and your hate, you're on the dark side. So here's the thing. What are the circumstances other than he was found so late and other than attachments? There are circumstances that should lead up to it, because that's not a guaranteed he's going to be evil no matter what. That's just things that are counting against him, right? That he didn't learn to get rid of attachments earlier on. But the circumstances which will take him to a place when he has already lived in a world where he's got an Obi-Wan next to him who's nurturing him as much as possible, you have to have things like actual circumstances that happen to push him. And the best way for a person to be pushed is in unprecedented times.
Well, especially if they have a tragic flaw, which, like, Anakin easily could have been presented as having. Like, as a former slave, having, like, some sort of issue with, like, giving up any sort of rights or, like, autonomy could have been a thing where it's like, yes, this is very good for you to want that of people, but maybe it goes too far. Maybe a scenario where he does not like having the clones be subjugated the way they are, and that could be a driving force for him. You know, it's a lot of stuff that they just never really, like, thought about. Like, they never deal with the, like, Anakin having a tragic flaw, you know, some kind of hamartia, like some kind of scenario where, you know, it's a valorous point that is pushed too far.
Right. They rely so heavily on the prophecy and the fact that they've told you the prophecy that they don't give you any other mechanics to get him from point A to point Z where he needs to be by the end of the trilogy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Point V. For Vader. Yeah.
For Vader.
I'm going to cut that because that's terrible.
No, it's a bad dad joke.
No.
I don't want you to cut it now. I want you to leave it in and admit that it was terrible and show everyone your fatal flaw.
Dad puns. Anyway, yeah, so, you know, this episode went off the rails, and it's hard for us not to kind of just, like, spiral out because we wanted this to be so much better.
I know. But here's the thing. Star Wars will always be fun. And I think if you like this movie and you've heard me say all of this stuff, I'm sorry. Because I think it's okay for you to like what you like. And I think that is, you know, fine. It's fine for you to enjoy this movie. I still think it's a pile of trash, but you like it, and that's valid.
Yeah. Well, on that note, we probably are just going to, like, talk in circles because we could do a full episode.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
Addy and Ben have said that they're always down to come back if we ever want to do, like, the prequel trilogy again, because there are so many takes you can have for it. You know, like, since this movie came out, we've, you know, at this point, Force Awakens had come out when this episode initially dropped, but we hadn't seen anything after that.
Right.
So, like, as much as I dislike Rise of Skywalker, I think it has one of the best uses of Force powers in that, like, fight that they have between them, like, in different places in the universe.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really cool Force thing that, like, would be cool for Yoda, for example. But they, you know, the thing we talk about in this where it's like, yeah, they just have lightning and Force push, and that seems to be it for Force powers. Like, all that creativity's not there, and it's not all on George. Like, George by himself can only come up with so much. The problem is that they didn't have more people in the room for all these writing sessions.
Yeah.
And you end up with three movies that kind of feel paint by numbers in the wrong ways.
Mm-hmm.
And the ambitious stuff, it doesn't get the nuance it deserves to make it work effectively, you know?
Yeah.
Next time we're going to be talking about Phantom Menace, which I maintain has the best ideas of the trilogy. It just was the worst executed of them in terms of, like, actually making it compelling. You know, like, I think that between the two, I go back and forth on which is worse between Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. Attack of the Clones, I think, like, has more of the stuff that we came here for, just not done very well. And Phantom Menace is trying to do some really cool stuff along with some, you know, very, very exact Star Wars stuff, and also doesn't do it very well. But both have concepts that could have been really cool, but Phantom Menace had better concepts that could have been cool, and Attack of the Clones doesn't get enough done so that by the time you get to Revenge of the Sith, it's got to blitz through just to be like, okay, now we're at the status quo. Like, let's get there. But yeah, so I feel like we're good talking about this, unless you've got something big.
Phantom Menace has some really fun things. Did it set up a trilogy of disaster? Yes. Are there definitely flaws in it that could be fixed? Yes. Is the pod race too long? Absolutely.
That's fair. It also has the really kick-ass lightsaber fight at the end. Like, Phantom Menace is more fun.
We will talk about that next time.
Yes, we will, because we are going to continue this trip into the prequels to Another Past, the first 3 episodes that eventually led to our spinoff. So we'll have more conversation then, and we'll be able to kind of, like, look at the 3 episodes in total and be like, did we miss anything? Would this be cool? We'll find out next time. But in the meantime, Sam, do you have anything you want to plug?
I do not. Not at all. Listen to Another Pass and listen to any of the great shows on our network, because I've been really enjoying some of them. And yeah, go check all of them out.
Yeah. we've got a ton of great shows. We've been adding new ones regularly. Books That Burn came on the network recently of us recording this. I was on, they do like a game night with authors and so forth that they have connections with, and I was invited to participate recently, and that was really cool on their Twitch channel. But they do a great show talking about how authors inflict trauma on characters in the books. So that's really cool. And if you like books, we've got so many other good shows. We also have Judging Book Covers and Circle of Friendship, just for the more literate people out there. That we've got tons of Star Wars conversations going on, and all the plenty of our other shows. We've got tons of video games conversations. For example, Reignite just finished their run through the first 3 games in the Mass Effect trilogy, and that's incredible. And I can't wait to see what Andromeda is like, since I haven't played yet, and I'm probably going to have to play it because I do the episode art, and I need to know what the hell I'm doing when I do the episode art for that show.
You're like, I kind of need to take care of that, huh?
Yeah. That actually is how I got into Mass Effect in the first place, because I was doing their episode art, and about 4 episodes in, I was like, well, shit, I'm running out of speed on this one. I probably need to know what I'm doing, because I can't. I can't. We'll see if that happens. They will probably drive me to playing Andromeda, which I've heard mixed things about. Some people really like it. We'll find out. That's not this show. This show is Another Pass. You can find more episodes of this show at certainpov.com. At certainpov.com. You can also find a link to our Discord. We are having this call on Discord right now, but there are tons of great conversations on Discord all the time. It's sorted in a way that actually a person coming in blind could follow what's going on. We've got a movie section, we've got a TV section, we've got a comic section, we've got a book section, we've got a video game section. It's great. You actually can tell what we're talking about and then jump in and join many of the great conversations.
Absolutely. It'll be so much fun. Come join us.
Yeah, so please do. If you don't feel like doing the Discord thing, you can find Another Pass on Twitter at Another Pass. You can find me on Twitter at Case Aiken. Sam, can they find you anywhere?
No, I'm a figment of Case's imagination, but you can find me on the Discord because I exist in that realm.
Right, solely as a red Force ghost.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the only way to be, and if I used my evil for good, it wouldn't be evil. So
exactly. So next time we will be talking about The Phantom Menace. We'll be looking at that original episode. And then after that, we will be back to our usual format. So we got Phantom Menace coming up next. And then after that, Sam, what can people expect from Another Pass?
On the next episode of Another Pass, we'll be talking about Highlander 2, The Quickening. But until then, if you enjoyed this, pass it on.
Thanks for listening to Certain Point of View's Another Pass podcast. Don't miss an episode. Just subscribe and review the show on iTunes. Just go to certainpov.com.
Yeah, so before we get into it, this episode will have less for me to cut out since there's like almost no prattle at the beginning. It's just like, yeah, we're in it. Let's do the episode.
1000%. I feel like last episode, the three of you were able to come up with like a more cohesive possibility, and this episode was like chaos.
Nostalgia is one of the strongest forces in the human psyche and is responsible for the continued existence of some of our favorite fandoms. From the minds behind the Dole Up in Dreams podcast and Isolation Cast Voices from Quarantine, Saturday Morning Confidential takes you on a deep dive into the properties that helped influence the artists and creators of today. So whether you are a Goonie, a Gem Girl, a Digi-Destined, or you just want to return to Oz, new episodes release on Fridays bi-weekly starting January 1st of 2021, and join us on the Wednesdays after the main show for the Serial Killer Radio Hour, where we sit down with the people responsible for the toys, shows, and fandoms that you love. Now you can find Saturday Morning Confidential at certainpov.com/SMCpod or on your favorite podcast platforms. So don't forget to tune in for another deep dive into the files of Saturday Morning Confidential.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.